All righty. So we've been promising all year to finally try to get a guest in here. Everyone, like one schedule or another, are trying to make stuff work. And so this is the official first guest for 2025, or at least fiscal 2026 by Microsoft standards.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Welcome to the new fiscal.
With that, usually I can make an hour for you during the day most days. So, if you're ever hard up.
Well, I wouldn't say that exactly, but this is a good thing because we can finally have an AWS segment, or at least how do you say it, equal time and equal opportunities.
Yeah.
As they say here in Chicago, some opportunities to make it work. Because like usually when I come in, I have to try an example. Larry will be the closest to at least try to show it in other things, other technologies.
Right.
But in the most cases, I will always fall to the the friendly and familiar for me at least. So it's I want to get friendly and familiar to the other piece. So first, Michael, let's tell us a little bit about yourself first before we continue, so we know where you came from. I know you work with me in that particular capacity, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself so we have an idea and why you're here.
So, Michael Geiser, I've been with Capgemini for about 8 years now. I work in the AWS COE, and I specialize in cloud migrations, actually on-prem to cloud and cloud to cloud migrations, as well as modernizations and especially Gen AI. Of course, everybody does Gen AI, nowadays, but again, I've been doing quite a bit of it recently. And for that, also what is known as an AWS Ambassador, which means I have multiple advanced certifications, as well as a fairly lengthy pedigree of community involvement. I've spoken twice at reInvent. I was just recently at the Public Sector Summit in DC that had about 35,000 attendees, and all sorts of other kind of community events and published articles, as well as some other things. My next series of blog articles are, so you want to run an AWS hackathon? Because right now, as part of Capgemini, we have an agentic hackathon going on, and we've got about 2,200 people signed up for it right now, with almost 300 teams. Yeah, so I'm really burning through the AWS credits. I think I've got about $20,000 worth of service credits already on the account, and I'm probably going to use every dollar of that. So it should be interesting.
Smokes.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people. I mean, you have other folks, I imagine, to help you scale into this, or are you actually using AI to scale it all, and you're the only master?
Yeah, actually, I am using AI to scale into this. So the application that goes and provisions the accounts, as well as provisions the users. And the most difficult thing about this was the users are, up until the deadline, constantly creating new teams, constantly switching teams. And the way this is set up is each team has their own AWS account. So we had this actually the last year when we did this, gentleman that I had working in India for me wrote an application to do the provisioning and deprovisioning. It stank. So literally last night from about 3 to 7 p.m., I vibe coded a replacement for it in Python that runs off of my desktop. I was considering doing it from Lambdas, but I could have a little bit more fun with it, doing some things if I'm running it in VS Code. So I wrote up a fairly lengthy set of my initial requirements. I set up the parameters for it as in a config file, gave it very specific directions for it, and got this application. It's 4 classes, about 550 lines of code, and damn it, it worked the first time. The only thing that it didn't work was something I didn't specify. Is the account codes in AWS can have a leading 0, but they're numeric. So it treated as a number. So it was dropping the leading 0, and of course it wasn't matching at that point. So all I had to do was then go back and tell it is treat the account numbers as strings because they have leading 0s, and it went back in and did it. And what literally so it took me about 3.5 hours to do that and debug it and test it, and then so what took me about 8 hours to do Monday took me 5 minutes to do Tuesday after I coded it.
Oh, wow. How about it?
Nice.
So I'm
There you
a
go.
huge proponent of Gen AI for things like that. If you're not using code assistants now, and generally multiple ones, so I use Gemini Code Assist on GCP. I use because I am multi-cloud. I don't necessarily support multi-cloud for most clients because it's really not a good business decision. They can't do one cloud well enough, much less do two, and
Right.
know the right security for everything. And there's really no business value to it. But I do know a little bit. I do know a little bit of Azure. Do know a little bit more of GCP than Azure, and a lot about AWS. But yeah, so that was actually really interesting, and that's part of what I was. So even going in and how you set it up to have the accounts, because the accounts require a unique email address. Well, I think I got 300 unique email addresses then. So really what I have I have my email address is mgeiser@mgeiser.net. So I have my own account with Namecheap. So I provisioned an account and added 300 aliases to it. So each one is a unique email address, and they all come to the same inbox. So I can monitor
Whoa.
people trying to, mine Bitcoins instead of doing Gen AI work really easily by getting the alerts from it.
Oh,
And
we'll come back to that one,
so
that's for sure.
I was having a lot of fun with it. It's going to be a good, four blog series.
Cool.
Very nice. We got to make sure that we post that over here. When you can, put into the chat where your blog series is. We'll want to make sure we include it into the show notes at the end.
I will do that.
Is for sure. So originally I was going to try to open up my AWS to see if we can find out what we can do as far as free or what we can try to learn on stuff. But I'm having a problem, but maybe you can troubleshoot this for me while we're going on. I'm going to share my screen and let's see if we can potentially troubleshoot and see. We're not challenging you, but it might be a simple problem.
One thing that's great that I really do give kudos to AWS about is they from the beginning tell you about the difference between your root account and a user account. They don't really want you using that root account. And they kind of fuss at you.
And for the regular accounts, it's optional. But for root accounts, multi-factor authentication is required.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, at least for the organization, for everything that I do, and by the end of summer, multi-factor authentication is going to be required on every root account, whether or not you're a part of an organization or just have one account.
Nice. Microsoft has a different way of going about it. Let's just say.
Yeah.
See, I think that. So when I look at AWS and Microsoft, I think about the difference between like C# and Java. Right, they're very similar. They're running down the same path. They're accomplishing the same goals, but they have a different mindset about them. And Amazon has probably 3 times the number of services because they've got individual services that do things very, very well, whereas Microsoft has fewer that cover 80% of your needs. And just if you want to do something that's outside of that, you're kind of out of luck. Kind of screwed a little bit.
Yeah. So let me I have actually also tell you about something else. This is a little bit more advanced, and it's something that you're going to have to, ask ChatGPT to figure out, or Nova if you're going to go stick AWS for AWS stuff. So there are 2 types of authentication mechanisms for accounts. One is IAM, which is handling the login that you're doing right now. The other one is their single sign-on. It used to be called AWS SOW. Now it's called IAM Identity Center. And what that does is it's just a lot less that you have to deal with. So if in IDC, the IAM Identity Center, you can do things. So if you want to be able to log in with your Capgemini email and just log into it, you can. So in our cases, that I'm actually on our network. If AWS would let me, if Capgemini would let me, I could set it up so the fact that I'm coming from my network, it would recognize that I'm coming from Capgemini, and just log me in and set that up. The other thing that you can do is you can with the IDC. If you want me to show you something for a second, I could share my screen and show you. Okay.
Yes, please.
Ralph's back down to captchas now, so yeah.
There you
Yep.
go.
At least
All right.
I'm getting somewhere on my end.
Yes.
So on this side, what we have is I've got some accounts set up. I've got an organization which has a master account and then all of your sub accounts underneath of it. But I've got a couple here. I've got one for work, one for a couple clients and things like that that we're doing that are Capgemini run. But this is that IDC login that you have. Now, what I've done here is I've got this is the organizational management account. So this is the main account for that. And then these are other sub accounts. And what I can do for this is I can set myself up with different roles and log in as them. And I've already done what you've done. I've gone in and I have this set up because I'm a big old security nerd. Is all the poor people that are in the hackathon have to set up MFA with their accounts, So I'm being that security guy. But when I go into this account, I can choose to go in either as administrator or I can go in as one of the participants. And I should have named it participant role, but I badly named it participant permission set, and I didn't feel like fixing it. So when I go in, I can go in as different respects. And now what I have here is I have the participants and everything that's in this. They're kind of locked down pretty tightly.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, like I was saying, I don't want them mining Bitcoins. So they can't go and subscribe to marketplace services. They can't spin up 48 CPU machines and have it run stuff. I set up a set of things that they're allowed to do and instance types they're allowed to use. So when you look at this is what the organization looks like. So I have a couple OUs, and for standard accounts, and the nice thing is I made this really easy to programmatically handle things. The name of the account is participant account 1 to 300. The email address for it is hackathon account 100 for participant account 100. And this is an alias that goes to the actual email that's the root email for the organization. So I made my life easy for this. And I can go in and if you want to get really nerdy real quick for things, I can go in and this is how you lock down what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. So they're allowed to access all these services. These are kind of the root services, Route 53, CloudFront, support. These are all the things that you're allowed to do normally. But in here said, okay, don't allow them. And so you're denying this action. They can't go and they can't set up models for their own. They can't set up provision models. They can do it on demand, which is what they really need to do. They can't buy enterprise support agreement for $1,000. They can't do like really expensive services like this. So they're allowed to use any of these instance types, right? Mm-hmm. So these are up to 8 CPUs and 16 CPU machines. And the other thing, they also are using the most cost effective, the most recent instances of them. They're all the 8 series and the T4s for the fractional ones. And then they can't go and create their own VPCs. They can't create an internet gateway or a NAT gateway. So all this stuff, all fun stuff. They can't make an S3 bucket public, right? And so things like that. And this is really easy to set up. Now we go back to the organization. So that service control policy is applied to this OU. Now this privileged accounts, I have another one set up that lets them use any kind of instance type that they want. And then, but I only actually, I don't think I have anybody in here right now. Yeah, no, I don't have anybody in there. Okay. So, I have ways to test. I have, if I'm testing the policy, I have a test account that I put in here. I attach the policy to here before I attach it to everybody. So, I generally do like to test in production, but not this.
Cool.
So not getting too far afield.
No, but
So this is so it makes your life easier, Ralph, if you do that, if you go this route, because then you can't lose stuff. It makes it a lot easier to log in. You give it really fun names, and also of other aliases for things.
All right. So I think I'm gonna work this out over here as we're going through.
And
in the meantime,
Amazon
since you have it open, since you have it open, you can show us maybe what, for example, if someone logged into the AWS with, I think there's a free feature. Most people can just get the account and get in, and then at that point, how do you say it? It doesn't charge you just for being there. There's no cover charge to enter.
They call it a
AWS space.
And
right.
So if you're getting an S3 bucket object storage, you can store up to 5 gigabytes for free, no charge. There's a certain amount of traffic you can take in and out and do things. And you can have, so I was showing those instance types. There's the T4 instance type. So you can run one of those for free constantly all month, and that's good. Or you can run 2 concurrently for half a month, or 4 concurrently for a week, right? So they give you essentially 750 hours of time on that, however you want to use it. Then, so I have so one of the demos that I did, I vibe coded a Chrome extension. So if you ever see a URL that's a QR code on a site, but they don't have the URL for it, you can just take a snip of that, drop it into here, and it'll pop the URL for you. So the URL that I have that on is just geisersoft.com, and I have that. It's a static website, so all I have to do is drop that into a bucket, the HTML and the CSS for that. And then I set up CloudFront, which is the CDN for that. And literally, as long as I serve less than a terabyte of requests a month, it's completely free. And needless to say, I get nowhere near a terabyte of data that's coming through there. So quite a number of the services are available in the free tier. You can set up a basic web app. So now what I've done before and for free is I've created an Angular app, put it into a bucket. It's all static code with CDN in front of it, cost me nothing. And I have a single, it's like a T4 medium, which is the biggest one you can get for free. And I have that handling the requests for it, the microservices for it. So because I'm not doing a lot with it, I'm doing some basic stuff. The API gateway is not costing me anything. And as long as I'm not exceeding the capacity or having more than that one T4 that's running it, and the T stands for timeshare. It's kind of a fractional thing. You can actually, if you're not using it for a while, you build up some credits. So if you get a burst, it lets you take more. Like if you just have 2 CPUs for it, if you banked some time, you can go up to 8 CPUs for a shorter period of time.
So basically it's a step up from the Lambdas, right? Which are completely transactional. You do have, with the T4, it is still time shared though. It is still sort of in between a dedicated machine and a Lambda, which is compute as a service. All right.
And the Lambdas you get. I'm trying to remember what it is, but just for a personal website, you get a ton of free Lambdas too.
Yeah.
And so the way the Lambdas run is you get more CPU. They bill you for how many seconds it runs and how much memory you allocate to it. Okay. And so if you allocate half a gig of memory, and it can run for about like 10 hours a month with that size of memory allocated to it before you start getting charged anything. So I could have just as easily put that on Lambda. And I actually like doing that because all about event-based processing, baby, right?
Yes.
Based architecture is the way to go.
Well, and putting an S3 bucket out and not having a web server, not having to stand up and provision a web server, you just have it kind of naked out there.
Yeah,
and have it wrapped. And you get to use your own domain name, and it automatically handles your SSL certificates and all of that.
it does. So when
It
you
it's just amazing.
yeah, I didn't originally purchase my domain name through AWS, but I transferred it to AWS.
Okay.
Route 53 is about $1 a month, and I have more service credits than I know what to do with. So
Oh, wow.
anything that, so I actually I have service credits expire on me because they have a customer feedback group, and you go in and you answer surveys for them. They give you a $25 or $100 service credit. You do some other things. You go to like the public sector summit that I was just at recently. They were handing out cards that were $25 and $50 service credits, and they had stacks of them. So if you're doing something personal and you care, you can get service credits to do whatever you want to do. And I haven't. The only thing that I've paid for was registering I registered a domain for my son. Well, that's not an AWS thing, so you can't pay for that with service credits. But
Obviously.
wrapping that way too long discussion up is
No, and
having
Larry's
done
taking
things on
notes because,
Azure,
yeah.
having things done on GCP. I think that AWS is, in my humble opinion, easier to start with, right? Easier to do something very simple. And I like the way that it scales better than, and even there's even some security things on the lower level that I like. So AWS has one thing that springs to mind: subnets, right? So if you have a subnet defined in an availability zone, you do things right. You have a region with 3 availability zones. In AWS, the availability zones are scoped to the subnets are scoped to the availability region, the availability zone. In GCP, the subnet you can have one subnet that spans 3 AZs. Well, normally that's not a problem unless you screw up your routing table or unless you screw up your firewall, in which case your entire region goes down. So that anything in that subnet, which is probably your application, is out. And so AWS limits the blast radius. And then even Azure, you can actually have subnets span regions, right? So it can go across regions, which I like. I like locking stuff down, right? So for that, scope it, keep it separate, because it's all IAC at this point anyway. You can't, it really isn't a lot of effort to make it a little bit more fine grained.
To feed that back to you a little bit, we use a lot of car talk, right? But we can also talk about food. Let's talk about food for a little bit, because so one of the things that I like about AWS again is that they have shrimp forks, right? They don't have Amazon is they've cut the problems into small enough pieces that each solution does one thing really well. Whereas Azure, you've got sporks, right? Or you've got the Swiss Army knife that can do a lot of things, but it doesn't do any of them particularly well. So it's kind of a trade-off. You do have to understand that if you've got 28 pieces of cutlery in front of you and you've got a 7-course meal coming, man, that's going to blow your brains out a little bit. But you know it does give you, once you've kind of gotten over that barrier to entry, once you understand the landscape and all of the tools that are available to you and how they fit together, you're able to really dial it down and just use the pieces that you need. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, you're
Yes. But even there's not, it's going to be edge cases if you get to the point where you just can't do something on whatever cloud you're on, right?
Mhm.
So whether you're on Azure or GCP or AWS, you can probably get it done, right? There's not going to be many things you can't do. I do tend to kind of not be very charitable towards OCI, right? So OCI does have some more limitations, right? And there are some things that some services that aren't available. They don't have the capacity that Azure and GCP and AWS have. So, but if you design your architecture right, where you're in 3 AZs and you're doing all this other, and you're doing the right architecture things, I really can't say that it makes one's not significantly better than the other, that it makes you want to switch. Now, if you're going into the cloud, right, or you don't have a big footprint yet in the cloud, and people say right now about 70% of workloads are still on-prem. So if you only got just your toe in the cloud, then it makes sense to really look at which cloud would be best for you. And maybe, if you just have a couple little workloads in Azure and you decide to go with AWS, well, move them, right? But if you have, it makes it really hard outside of like mergers and acquisitions to have a big cloud move. So if you buy a company and they're running on Azure, even then, you need a really good reason to move it off of Azure onto AWS, right? Because generally they're doing their own thing. If you're truly merging the company, if you're truly absorbing it, right, you might want to move some assets, or maybe you're just moving data. You're taking those customers and exporting them from whatever applications are running there and importing them into yours. So what that cloud to cloud migrations need to do are different. Maybe another time we'll talk about it, but for cloud to clouds, there's one thing. Everybody's heard of the 7 Rs of cloud migration, right? So if you're going on-prem to cloud, you've got relocate, rehost, refactor, all the 7 Rs for that. Well, one of the things that Capgemini is developing into a methodology is cloud to cloud is becoming much more popular for mergers and acquisitions, for people that went into multi-cloud and saying, I'm spending more money having people having to support 2 clouds. I'm not really getting any value out of it. Let's make a decision, go to one of them. So these cloud to clouds is becoming more popular. So I actually came up with 6 Rs of cloud to cloud migrations, which we're going to have a white paper on in like 4 or 5 weeks for that. So it's actually kind of cool, something that I started, that the company's picking up and is running with and expanding on and making it something that we're going to actually use.
Cool. Well, once that hits, we might have you back to get it from the horse's mouth, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's so one of the things. So the client that I'm working for right now is having to do a lot of their work on-prem because they are working with a government contract, and some of the data that they have, their the contract that the data was brought in under requires them to be on-prem, and this is an extension of it. So there's going to be some cases where you really can't get off-prem. Have you seen people going from the cloud back to on-prem? Is that something that you've seen?
Well, not in any major motion. There's always going to be some things where you have a little bit of repatriation, and that might make some sense.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the term that a lot of people are using, repatriation.
Right.
And if you really look at what are your costs, one of the things that I find when people do it on a cost basis, they're saying that, oh, it costs me so much more in the cloud. If I bought this server, it would cost me this much, but it costs me this much per hour to run it. Well, in AWS, you're not paying for network cables. You're not paying for 42U racks. You're not paying for cooling. You're not paying for people to rack stuff up and to update things. So if you look at the people like the Vanguards, Citibanks, who are smart people, who are really good at accounting, Vanguard says our cost of compute is 30% less on the cloud than it was in on-prem.
Right.
I believe that, right? They have the sophistication that they were able to look at it. Most companies can't attribute the actual cost to it. There's this big bucket of stuff that they pay for out of money that never gets charged back to you. So for that, that works. And then The other thing is people should consider and talk to the right person of whether or not that application can run in the cloud. Because AWS and Azure and GCP, although Azure more than GCP, you have for US East and West. So you have US East 1 and US West 2, which are the two main East and West data centers. They are qualified for FedRAMP moderate workloads. They have US GovCloud East and West, which works for FedRAMP high. And then you also have secret and top secret clouds. So the other thing that I noticed from me working in data centers when I was there till now, in every company I worked for, I shouldn't have had prod access, but I did, right? Because I needed to, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, right? I needed to access logs. I needed to do stuff. I should not have had, I was a committer, right? I shouldn't have had prod access, but it was the only way to get stuff done, right? And with AWS and with Azure and with GCP, your security posture is much better than on-prem because you have auditing controls for that. You have you have things that you can't fudge, right? Because now the fact that I know that they fudged the fact that I had prod access, right? When you appeared on the audit reports, it never showed me as having prod access, but I did,
Well, and physical access to machines. I mean, forget prod. If you don't have access control to the physical machines, then you don't have access control, period.
If you have physical access, game over.
Game over.
And how many small to medium companies? How many small medium companies have an actual data center as opposed to just some machines in the back room?
Oh, right. I worked for SEI Investments, big company, right? They had one of their data centers was on site. I could walk into it.
Right.
That's not good.
Without signing anything, without any kind of badge in, no access control at all. Even just
they don't remember. The millennials don't know what that room is behind it. It's all those machines there. We're not sure. It might be for the air conditioning, I think, or something.
Yeah.
yeah.
So they don't want to unplug anything. They don't want to lose it cool.
Yeah. Now AWS, for example, they have 143 different certifications, right? So ISO 20, which, pick them, FedRAMP high, FedRAMP moderate, all these other ones, which is about 142 more than most companies have. And 143 more than a lot of companies have. Those pesky little picky 3-letter agencies that surround Washington, D.C., they use AWS and Azure and GCP, right? So I'm pretty sure if satellite imagery recognition is being run in the cloud, I'm pretty sure your workload can do that too securely. Pretty sure.
The idea is somebody second guessing somebody who's basically billions of dollars richer than them, doing billions of items more than they're doing, and then they're going to second guess them. That's my favorite. It happens more often than not. They know better.
It's the difference between taking your car to the dealership to get it worked on versus a shade tree mechanic, right? I mean, there's a lot of things a shade tree mechanic, right? Just somebody that kind of occasionally does work in it can get done for you. But man, I mean, if it's business critical, which IT is business critical across the board. I mean, it
really is now.
Absolutely.
I went to the doctor this morning and the Wi-Fi was down. What? What's going on?
But you just have to pay for it. I mean, you really should. If you're running a business, you don't hire your nephew to do the books for you, right? You shouldn't. I mean, why are you going to hire them to do the website for you?
Right.
Because that happens.
I mean, you could, but then pay the consequences of said activity.
Yeah. Exactly. And no matter how good the people are, I've met some people, worked at Marsh & McLennan, and when I worked for there, man, they had people that knew their security and did it well. But those 3-letter agencies, they audit AWS all the time, and they contribute to their security. So they have a better security posture. I actually have a deck that I wrote about all the myths that people have. And one of them is, Amazon could steal my IP if it's on AWS. No, it couldn't. No, they can't. And here's why. They can get my data. No, they can't. Right. And same thing with Azure and GCP. Your stuff is secure online. And and anything not is a conspiracy theory that kind of ranks up with microchipping the COVID shots. It's really. Oh, sorry,
well,
Larry.
yeah.
You think they actually did
Yeah,
microchip the COVID shots, don't you?
yeah.
Actually, what they did is they microchipped the horse dewormer. So that's
Intervict, yeah. Oh man, gotta stay away from politics and religion. That's what we have to. We can talk.
We try really hard, but it just bleeds in sometimes. What are we going to do?
It does.
And we're getting close to time, so I do want to throw out one other bone. So talk about, you mentioned earlier having cloud architects come in and do the architecture. When you're designing and architecting greenfield, right, or maybe even a light brownfield, but when you're designing an application that's going into the cloud, do you need to know when you get started which cloud it's going into? Does it matter at this point?
Well, if you're just doing the abstract, no, right? Because whether you're going to the way you design in the cloud is different than on-prem. So when you're in the cloud, you're not going to have a DMZ, right? You don't need to have a firewall and then a DMZ and have a proxy back to another firewall, to an app layer, to another firewall, to your database layer. The way that the cloud is set up, it flattens that, but actually makes it even more secure in a lot of ways. So when you're accessing that, you can do it fairly generically. Say, I've got an internet gateway here. The exact implementation of whether or not it's on AWS or Azure or GCP, it's still an internet gateway. Now, the difference are going to be there's going to be some subtle differences in there. So if you're designing the actual implementation, you need to know what cloud. So if I'm doing things and I need to call out.
Again, back to cars.
Yeah.
You're going to have four wheels and a motor, but you need to know the make and the model in order to put the right oil filter, for example, because that's a very specific part for a very specific engine, and it matters. But when you're talking about driving a car, driving it, you can pretty much drive. If you can drive one, you can drive any number of miles.
Yes. It's kind of like the difference more between a pickup truck and a Tesla. Right. You get in, you push the button to turn it on, you push the big one on the right in order to make it go, and the square one on the left to make it stop. And, but what's under the hood is a lot different. And you know what? If you don't lift up the hood, do you care?
Do you care? Exactly. All right, cool. Michael, thank you.
So while we were here, I solved my problems, by the way. So it turned out at the end of the day, I had more than one MFA going on. And I'm like, wait a minute, when did I set up this other one? We went through this exercise before, Larry and I. We were like, oh, I can't seem to get into that one. Let me make a new account. And I did that one without realizing that in the first place, and I'm looking at the trail over here, that MFA wasn't set up on the first one properly. So I just got lazy and I just set one up from scratch because we walked through it. All fine and well.
There you go.
Then I go into my phone and I find both MFAs in the same place. They just don't tell you, which is a good thing, unless you recognize which one is associated to which. It will not tell you which one to use. So I only have two, so it was pretty easy to tell off the bat which one I should use. But actually, it's so funny because I described it in a certain way when it asked me to give a description. It looks like that's what it did. And so it had my code words to say exactly what it was. So now I have both of them working. I have one for M365, which is the one that I was wondering. Well, let me go find out where that one was. I found it. Then I found the MSN one, which is my original when we started a long time ago, before even Azure was secure. It was the Amazon one we were using because that was the only thing that had stuff that we could play with. Azure was like basically, hey, welcome here. There's an ante. Anything you tried to do was going to cost you. There was no exact free past the 30 days. Azure still has some freebie stuff a little bit, but not as much. But what you're telling me now is there's a little bit more that we can do now with this stuff over here. So we're going to, before I let you go over here, I'm going to ask one thing. If I came to the home screen, the console home, as what the first screen that shows up. And I wanted to play with something. What would be your recommendation if I wanted to really get into Amazon stuff? What would be the first thing I should do to play? Or maybe the site I should go to with a list of, hey, here's a list of things you should play, like a travel guide for Amazon.
So, well, the first thing that you're going to do, the thing that kind of defines the cloud and was literally the first service that AWS offered was S3. So, and still, so many people, S3 is, if you take a poll of 100 customers, and they say, what service do you use? 100% of them are going to have S3 in that list, right? So, S3. Yeah, so S3 is simple storage service is the best place to start because it gives you the concept of the buckets, and buckets are the same thing for, object storage on Azure and object storage on GCP are same concept, right? Different names, different things, but that's step one in cloud. And then after that, looking at the way the VCMs, EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute for AWS, you've got the different engines for both Azure and for GCP. They're both good. There you go.
There we go. So what happened was I went there and I saw. By the way, just for everyone to have context. I came in and I had my empty right over here. So I like this one because it's empty. I actually, turns out I put stuff in the other one, but I want it to be empty. And you see how it says recently visited? I could have done, and right off the bat, it said there, here's some stuff you can explore. And S3 was there. So I just clicked on it and here's where it brought me.
Yep.
General purpose buckets and everything else. And then, and check it out. Look how it works. Look at that resource guide. FAQs. Start with S3.
I'll send you this link so you can include it. But there's also this thing called workshops.aws. And you want to learn how to do things. It basically gives you these things on how to do them click by click by click. So you can go in and you can set up. You want to learn how to use Bedrock, which is one of their Gen AI tools. You can go in and it'll teach you how to do it. Now, I probably wouldn't jump right into Bedrock. I'd probably start with learning a little bit more about the environment and how to do it.
Unless I'm a Flintstone, I would jump right into Bedrock.
I was gonna say every time you say Bedrock, I twitch. I'm sorry.
Twitch.
Yeah, I'm just going back and I'm thinking of the that one the commercial where Fred and Barney were smoking. Do you remember that? You ever see that?
We remember smoking. That was a thing.
Yeah. My niece and nephew went to the same high school that I did, and I told them that when I was in high school, it was a senior privilege to go to the smoking lounge. We had a smoking lounge, and if you were a senior and in good academic standing, you could go there and you would smoke with the teachers, and they would bum cigarettes off of you. And they told me I was a liar. They said, no, there's no way. You are BSing us, Uncle Michael. That is crap.
It's true. They were already trying to segregate people back then as far as the smokers and non, because it was already a thing when it was like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should accommodate those folks and start creating these areas and then make it a privilege to do. I remember that really well. It was the 70s. And yes, the 70s.
We had a smoking ring. Right outside, we had a smoking ring that everyone would go to. Yeah.
So there was a thing, and it's like even when I was working, there was a place for that to happen. And usually, it's like some stairway hall. It wasn't even outside.
Glass room. In the smoking aquarium. It was the smokers' aquarium. So they put all the smokers in an aquarium into a glass room, and they wonder why they smelled like smoke so much more than they did otherwise.
Yeah, and the windows get tinted. I mean, come on, you gotta love it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, my spouse went to Boston, and he went to a quote unquote dive bar over there, and she was complaining about how the odor or something in a dive bar. It's like, well, yeah. It's like, and I'm trying to explain to her this is why there was smoking back then, because back then you did not notice such a thing.
You didn't smell.
It also tells you your wife doesn't know what marijuana smells like, right?
Yeah. It had some bennies. I mean, back in the day. Speaking of Benny, so I'm looking at this over here. Next time, maybe we'll dive into like a couple of things, and definitely the AI stuff. Whatever we can do AI for free to learn, and this is community, right? So it's mostly about learning to do stuff, seeing what potential opportunities to go further in. That's what we're going to do, and I think we should have a recurring AWS segment from this point out.
All right, Michael. Hey, thank you very much, and thank you, Ralph,
for having me. This was a blast. Love to do it again sometime.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.